All right, this is business 483 with the Andreessen case, and we will start with a prayer by Austin.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that we could be here today, that we have the opportunity to discuss this case study, and we'd ask that we might be able to have the Spirit with us as we do this, and that we might be able to discern the most important parts of this case, and that we might be able to learn from this. And we would ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Austin. So, I guess I can share a spiritual thought. So in one of my religion classes, we've been talking a lot about the fall of Adam and Eve. And in one of my group discussions, we thought of the analogy of, well, we specifically were talking about Christ's plan compared to Lucifer's plan, where Lucifer said that everyone could return, but we had no agency, and we equated that to, someone trying to get into med school or become a doctor, and they're given all the answers to every exam they take. They don't have to study, they don't have to try. At the end, they may have passed everything, but have they really learned anything? Have they increased their knowledge? And the answer would be no, of course, because they didn't have to work towards it. So it's the same in life and with the plan of salvation. That's why we have agency to learn from our own decisions and our own mistakes. Because really, this life is meant for us to learn and grow. It's not just for us to become like our Heavenly Father, although that's what He would want for all of us. It is kind of a weeding out process to see who is the elect, So I just thought that was interesting, and it helped me appreciate the agency that we've been given a little more.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's see. So the first question is, was the venture capitalist industry attractive for A16Z to enter in 2009?
So I guess I can just start out here. So I really don't think it was a very attractive industry to enter into in 2009. There's several difficulties that they had. So from the text, the activity level of the U.S. venture capital industry is roughly half of what it was in the 2000 era peak. And then they also said it had only 8.9, I believe, percent return compared to the 20.6 with the S&P 500 index.
Yeah, I'll put a similar answer that it was certainly not attractive in the traditional sense. It needed some shaking up. You also have to keep in mind in 08, the economy took a turn for the worse. In addition, at that time, the dot-com bubble had burst many years earlier, actually. So with taking the same approach, it certainly was not an attractive market. But I think what those two guys saw is just a different approach. And I found it interesting, the approach of, it's not about money. It's more about paying it forward, helping each other out, and truly networking. That approach came to fruition right about the same time that social media and social networks came to the rise with Facebook and Instagram and so on. So I'm sure that kind of thinking of leveraging your social network to gain access to more information and better access to quality people played a big role in the business model that they came up with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it said somewhere in the text that 90% of the returns on investment came from like 3 or 4% of the venture capitalist firms. So they had to be in the very top in order to succeed. So going into that, I'm surprised that they really that they chose to go into it because it was such an unattractive industry at that point. But I think what Herb was right because they didn't go into it with the traditional sense of venture capitalists. They were going to change it up a little bit because they saw one how venture capitalists had treated them in the past and other entrepreneurs. And I think you're right that it focused more on the networking aspect and helping people to grow their own company and just handing the company off to somebody else and giving them funds. So I think that was the competition was really fierce in the venture capitalist firms for the top few firms. But I think the biggest reason they went into it is because they were thinking about it differently than the rest of the firms. So
Yeah, I wish the case study had given us more information on these other successful VCs. You know, what were they doing right compared to the remaining, 95+% of VCs that were struggling? What were they doing differently?
right.
Yeah,
I think a lot of it may have just been that they were the top firm in the sense that they've been around the longest and they had a lot of market share. Because it sounded like, from what I read, that a lot of people went to the big venture capitalist firms, but they weren't always pleased with how they dealt with them. So the name and brand recognition that, all right, we know that this a lot of people use this venture capitalist firm, but I think there are a lot of things to learn. I'm sure that they are doing a lot of things different to attract customers. You know. All right. Does anyone else have anything else they want to mention about that?
I just kind of thought it was interesting. Basically, they kind of researched how well they figured out. Like most of these companies are not doing the best, and they're not making their own money. So we need to set up our structure differently from what they have, so that we can take advantage of the people with the wealth of knowledge in that area. They kind of just went after that specific criteria. I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but they wanted to dominate kind of the tech market with venture capital, and so they got all the people who had expertise in tech, which I think is really, really smart.
Yeah, I agree that by kind of like working on a specific area, and I think they recognize that that's where a lot of the growth is going to come from, is in the tech industry in the future. I think it was really smart for them to focus on that. And that does get into the next question, which says, what silver lining did the company see, and how did they plan to succeed in this difficult environment? I think we've pretty much discussed that, but I mean, they plan to be different. They plan to focus on networking and helping the founder instead of just giving them funds and offering them a CEO to run the company. They were allowing the founder to run their company, and giving them all the advice and funds that they might need. So I think that was one of the biggest differences between them on how they plan to succeed in the environment, just by setting themselves apart and focusing on one specific criteria and group of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I found it noteworthy that they took the time to look at the past performance of some of these very successful companies and how they had all been managed by the founding entity for an extended period of time. The other thing that I found interesting is that they were really, money obviously is what is an important part of the equation for any venture capitalist, but they approached it more with almost a Christ-like attitude of one, not doing everything out of self-interest, and two, not stepping in and doing everything for these startups. While other VCs would step in and would say, okay, you suck as a CEO. We're going to take you out. We're going to put somebody else in.
Right.
Your marketing person is not experienced enough. We're going to take them out. Kind of dictating to the founder how they should run their company. These guys took more the approach of, hey, we're going to teach you true and proven principles, and then let you make the call, what you want to do. Somewhere at the end in one of the exhibits, there was this letter that one of the guys had written, 5 things that he didn't like about traditional VCs. And one of the points was that, traditional VCs would just step in rather than explaining the situation. They would just step in and make the decision, or present, hey, this is what you do, because I've seen it previously happening here and happening here. With these startups, you need to do the same thing and kind of conform everybody to the same route to take to market. And there was something else I was going to say in that same letter that I really found interesting. Honestly, found more interesting than a lot of the stuff that they wrote in the case study. Yeah, so that they confuse pattern matching with actual knowledge. Again, to the point of, these guys were more about educating the startups and then let them make their call. And the other one, what was the other one? Oh yeah, that they're pseudo tough. So the one thing I underlined here is the strength to explain. So what real tough is, he explained, the strength to explain in detail to an entrepreneur what she or he is doing wrong when the company is doing well in order to improve her performance. So the startup may be doing really well because they're based on this great idea, but the founding CEO still has shortcomings. So instead of just saying, oh man, you're doing a really good job, just keep on going, saying, hey, yes, you have this great strength. Yes, you have this great idea, this great product, but here are some shortcomings for you as a business person, as a CEO, that you need to address now so that long term this company will still be successful. And as you scale, you are going to be you're going to be capable of handling that increase in demand and the increase in income, that increase in manpower. So I just thought that was really, it reminded me of how the gospel, our gospel, does not dictate what people have to do every day. Not like the Torah or the Catholics, where it says, okay, on Friday you don't eat meat, you only eat fish, and so on and so on. The true gospel of Christ educates you, teaches true principles, and then allows you to govern yourself. Sorry for the ramble.
And are we still so as far as that goes, I guess something I thought was just also kind of set them apart. I really liked how they kind of picked out the entrepreneurs. They understood that the company isn't everything, and the entrepreneur is a big part of that, which is, I think, in part why they picked entrepreneurs as their the people that they would hire for their company, because those are the people that know how to work with these companies and know how to build them up. So like they were talking about, some of the bigger companies, they had some weaknesses that might have made them unattractive to work with at the beginning, like Google. But their strengths and what their founders had was kind of outweighed the weaknesses that might have been at the beginning. And they really treated them with respect. There's that whole kind of list of examples how, just like you were talking about, Herb, the things that they didn't like that venture capitalists did. And it seems like they really tried to be the opposite of what the typical venture capitalist firm would do. They were really respectful to entrepreneurs. They had the what was it, the $10, I believe, for every minute late, and they were really attentive. Got a prompt yes or no when it was when the idea was presented to them, and they gave a reason why as well to the entrepreneur for why they would want to back up their company or invest into their company. So I thought those are some things that set them apart from the competition. And I did agree with you, Herb, with just kind of the gospel undertone that was there. I thought that was very interesting how, just kind of teaching the principles and let them govern themselves, just like Joseph Smith said. So I thought it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Austin. And I like how you pointed out those little things that they did differently, like the $10 for every minute. The other thing that I noticed was how the what does GP stand for again? Is it general partner? How their compensation was different from traditional venture capitalists. So these GPs, they had a much higher incentive to make sure, while they were given more freedom on one hand, their incentives were based on them making good decisions rather than just getting paid regardless of what the VC's fund was doing. And then what you said about the founding partners of those big companies, Google, Amazon, and the likes, traditional VCs would have shied away from them because of their weaknesses. But again, similar to the gospel, as a missionary, when we taught people, we didn't shy away because of their weaknesses. We reached out to them and we taught them because of their weaknesses and the strengths that they had. Anyway, so just, to me, this case was very reminiscent of the gospel and how we should see people.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of made me think of how I put myself in the shoes of a new startup, and if I was seeking capital, and a lot of people probably recognize that they have a good idea, but they don't really know what direction to take it next, or they recognize that they have weaknesses in certain areas, but they don't want to give up complete control of their company. They still want to have a say in it. And I think that what Andreessen and Horowitz did is that they really appealed to that group of people, because now they know they can come to someone, keep control of their company, and yet they will help them grow. They'll tell them what their weaknesses are, and they won't just, as you said, say, "Oh, you're doing great," because that doesn't lead to success. Because we all have weaknesses, and we all have things we need to change. It reminds me of a quote that says something like, "Focus on your strengths, but be aware of your weaknesses." So it's really important to know what your weaknesses are so that you can work around them and seek to overcome. So I think that as a venture capitalist firm, they've really set themselves apart. They appeal to, especially I think of the IT, because a lot of the IT guys they're very smart with the product they've created, and they have a vision of where they want to go, but they may be lacking the business expertise to get there. And so I think it's really smart that they've sectored themselves in the way they have, and especially how they've, just like you said with their GPs, they provided a way for everyone in the company to benefit from it, instead of just the top two partners getting the good returns. So it's really, for the entire company, their venture capitalist firm really is structured to help them to grow to become successful. And I do think it's interesting how you brought up the big companies like Amazon and such that are billion-dollar companies now that may have just been ignored in the past. So yeah, I really think they've done a great job with that. See, so
I like the quote, Landon, that you just mentioned, that we need to know both our strengths, but we also have to be aware of our weaknesses. And that's another thing I noticed in this case study, that even when they turned an entrepreneur down and were not willing to invest, they gave him detailed feedback on why. And I promise you that a lot of those startups took that information to heart and made changes, and it made them a better startup because of that feedback. And I think, again, that's important. It's important in the gospel. I mean, that's why we have PPIs. That's why we are supposed to have one-on-one time with our children, whether it's as part of a family home evening or a family council. So we don't just always only celebrate and focus on our successes, but we also address weaknesses and shortcomings. Because it'll make us better in the long run. And anyways, I was really impressed with that.
All right, great. So we've kind of covered a lot of this. I'll do this one. It says, what choices do technical founders have for financing that they didn't have a decade before?
Well, I mean, they have really a lot of choices. So they have, they talk about the angel investors. I think that's a big, I think that's the biggest competition that these VC firms have. I mean, even the two founders, both Andreessen and Horowitz, both were angel investors, and they had success in that. And then there's crowdfunding. There's just a bunch of ways. It's so much easier for people, just random people, through the use of technology to crowdfund these entrepreneurs, and they don't have to go through these venture capitalists anymore. So I think since there's such a diverse way, I don't know, there's so many ways to raise capital nowadays that these venture capital firms really need to be on their game and kind of step it up in order to stay in the game and stay with their competition.
Yeah, I was kind of going the same direction as you with crowdfunding. I can't remember the name of the company now. I lost it in my head. It's some startup company that helps Kickstarter. With those kind of options out there where they really don't have to give up much equity, but it gets their name out there and it gets them going with capital, there's a lot of opportunities and benefits to that. But I also think that there's a lot of, with the changes that Andreessen Horowitz brought to the venture capitalist market, I think that kind of opened the VC market for them, There's a lot of people that wouldn't have regularly gone to a venture capitalist before, but are now willing to. So I think that's another one that, as the changes have been implemented with Horowitz, then they've recognized that that's another option for them as well, as to actually go to the venture capitalists. Where before, I think that they, like you said, Austin, they were kind of turned away from venture capitalists. They wanted to avoid that at all costs. Wanted it to be one of their last sources of financing.
Yeah, both of you made great comments, and so I think there was an action and a reaction, and then a new action and a reaction, right? So prior to all these new sources of funding, before they would have to go to, what is it called, Series A funding, before they would have to approach a VC. So prior to all the crowdsourcing and angel investors and whatnot, startups will go to a VC and they would basically be at the mercy of these venture capitalists, right? The idea, this great momentum, this new insight, this new approach, radically different business model, and they would need to sell that to the VC to get access to the funds so that now the startup could take it to the next level. But with that, they gave up a lot of freedom, a lot of independence, right? So then with the event of the internet, crowdsourcing became much more available. Angel investors jumped in earlier, but which now pushed them away from VCs, right? So the startups wouldn't have to go to VCs and lose all their freedom and independence. But with that comes the danger of now you're dealing with early evangelists, right? You're dealing with all the people that have the same opinion as you. They all think you have invented the cat's meow, the new sliced bread, the new Amazon, the new Google, and everybody's telling you what you want to hear because they all are caught up in the same vision. But just having an idea is one thing. Implementing that and taking it to a successful stage is a whole nother thing. That's where Andreessen Horowitz just developed this radically different approach of saying, hey, Austin, hey, Landon, we're going to allow you to continue to run your company. We're going to allow you to continue to making these decisions, to keep your freedom and independence. But we are here as an honest partner. We want to build a real relationship with you. And we have access to all this great experience and expertise in similar fields, to people that were in similar situations as what you find yourself in now. And we want to leverage that to truly prepare you for tremendous success and give you all the guidance in the world. Because again, especially with crowdsourcing, I think crowdsourcing right now is a fad because, John Doe on the street is excited that supposedly he gets in on the ground level of a great new product, but John Doe doesn't have the experience to understand what it really takes to bring a product to fruition. All the technical challenges you have, the distribution, product improvement, and so on and so on. So I think, and what is it, Andreessen Horowitz? Was that their name? I think they're really onto something with just focusing much more on a partnership between their company and startups, and based on honesty and truth and real quality feedback.
Yeah, I completely agree. It makes me think of the show Shark Tank, which I'm sure you guys have seen.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, when investors come, they want the money, but more importantly, they're seeking a partner to help them get their foot in the door and to advise them and to help them with their company. The money isn't really their main reason for seeking the help. So I think that's a really good point, Herb, that really it's not just a matter of raising capital, but it's a matter of getting a partner that's willing to help you and actually has the ability to help you and lead you in the direction you need to take. And also to, as you said, not just constantly agree with you, to show you where you're wrong and more importantly, show you why you're wrong in certain instances. So that was a really good point. All right. Let's see. So it says, think of source as the ability to get founders to come in the door seeking money. How does the way A16Z treat its founders differ from the way traditional VC treats them? We've talked a lot about that, but does anyone else have anything they want to talk specifically about that?
I just think they have a model that's set up so that they continually have leads. I think because of the way they're doing surveys with the founders that would come in and talk with them, right? And they said that they would highly recommend them to their friends, which I think if you constantly have that as far as marketing goes, you're going to be in a way better place than the other VC firms that kind of have their own way of doing it, kind of do it through spin-offs or whatever. And you're going to have a step above. Just like it said in the text, stars, no stars. And you're going to kind of constantly get that stream of fresh ideas, fresh blood, new founders, new entrepreneurs with great ideas that you can invest in. So I think that's one of their strongest assets is what they're doing with that, how they're handling those founders that come in.
You're 100% right, Austin. It's that paying forward approach, right? Even if a startup comes in and it's a complete disaster, but you treat them with respect, like you said, you give them some honest feedback, you give them some guidance, and you explain to them why they are not a good fit for you. Those entrepreneurs, those startups, just like you said, Austin, they know other people that work in the same kind of realm of inventing stuff, of taking a fresh approach, of thinking about things differently. And they're going to share that. They're going to say, oh, man, I just met with this guy down the road and they give me this great feedback. Why don't you take your idea to them? Just like you said, Landon, with Shark Tank, it becomes just this engine of a ever increasing stream of entrepreneurs who have fresh and new ideas and who say, hey, I'm going to go visit A16Z and see what they have to say.
Yeah, and I like what you said, because in reality, if they're not honest with them and they just turn them down and say, oh, that's a bad idea, but don't explain why, they either are going to just completely quit and kind of lose that entrepreneurial drive, being afraid of failure in the future, or they'll start the company thinking that they're right and be a failure that way as well. So I think that just as in life, we have to explain why certain decisions are made. Everything needs to be a learning opportunity for us, and I think that's really, as we've discussed, is that's what's setting them apart. Is people aren't afraid to go to them because they know that they will treat them with respect and they will give them good advice. So even if they do get turned down and say, oh, we don't want to work with you, it's still going to be a very valuable experience for them, because they can say, okay, well, here's what we need to do to change, and here's how we can be more appealing to other capitalist firms in the future, and this is what we can do to grow our company, and these are our weaknesses. So I think that's like spot on with, they've got it figured out with that. And then the next question says, will this increase or decrease or have no effect on the number of potential deals that A16Z sees? I think it's, as we've discussed, I think it's definitely going to increase the number of potential deals that they see, due to the things we've discussed, that people are not as afraid. They're more willing to seek the counsel of A16Z because even if they do get turned down, they're still going to have a valuable experience. I think it'll increase their potential deals. Let's see. And then, okay, so the next question is, how will this change if A16Z begins to fire CEOs because they are not performing well? Will this increase, decrease, or have no effect on the number of potential deals that A16Z sees compared to the competition?
Well, I definitely think it'll decrease. I think that's fairly obvious with this, especially since they place such a high emphasis on the entrepreneur, the CEO. I think if they were to start to do that, they would lose their focus on just the CEO, which is what they've been doing, which is what has made them successful. And they've started to put it just on the company, just like all the other venture capital firms. And so I think if they were to start to do that, they would become like all of them, and they'd become probably like the 97% who don't see most of the money. So I'd say that would really decrease the number of potential deals that they would see.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, it would almost be a violation of their founding statement, and they would be viewed as hypocrites.
Yeah. All right, so the next question is, how does the operating team of A16Z source, pick, win? Does it increase the odds of getting more high-quality deal flow? If so, why? Let's see. So I think that as we think about like successful startups and startups that are unsuccessful, A16Z is going to attract both because, as we've discussed, they're not going to have the fear of failure as much and go into them. And so I think that they will see a wider range of potential deals. And they also just see an increased number of potential deals because of the extra motivation that people have to use them. So I feel that they will have more good deals, but they need to be careful of choosing which deals are good, which I think they've set it out pretty well. They had the 3 criteria of who they would work with, and I can't remember off the top of my head what those were, but it was something about they were either the CEO or the founder of their company, and a few other things that were if they met those 3 criteria, then they would continue to work with them. So I feel that they will have an increase in deal flow, but they need to be careful not to just grab every deal that comes their way, which I think they're being very careful of anyway. So
yeah, I think they, as that flow of startups gets bigger and bigger, A16Z can just be pickier and pickier,
right,
because there's going to be more quality startups coming to them, and a big reason for that is the founders that have truly revolutionary ideas or new products or just really are looking forward into the future. Those guys are very protective of that intellectual property, of their baby, right? Because it fuels their heart, it fuels their passion, it gets them up out of bed at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because they're all dedicated to that business model. And because of that, they really do not want to give up any kind of control, any kind of freedom to a venture capitalist and have somebody outside tell them, hey, these are your weaknesses. This is why we're putting you in the research lab, and we're going to have somebody else run the business. And I think that's what's going to attract these top notch founders to A16Z, because they just see that difference. They realize that these guys really want to be partners. They want to help me. They want to be a partner of my vision. And because of that, I think they just it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're just seeing better and better deals come into their doors.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you're right on point there. I also think the operating team of A16Z, I think that's their secret weapon, because all of the people on their operating team, they've just handpicked, and I think that was the biggest for me, and we'll talk about that in the next question, but that was the biggest kind of thing that helped me to determine whether or not they should try to double their assets or not was this operating team that they had going on. And I feel like it was so effective because it got rid of the typical VC model. They talked about, they had I think they call them the silverback gorillas, right? So they had the typical VC with that, and whatever that guy would say would go, and you had the others that kind of had less say in what went on. And with the operating team of A16Z, it was totally different, and everyone had a say, and there was nobody who was vetoing the other ones. They could all, I think it was saying in the text, they could all go with any company without the others stopping them. And they're just really experienced people. You had, just like you were talking about, Landon, they picked out the people who were, the CEOs or a founder, and that were really, really dedicated to the business model and to the values that A16Z had. So I think that's their secret weapon, like I was saying before.
Yeah, great point. All right, so here's where we get to vote. That says, put yourself in the shoes of Andreessen and Horowitz. You must decide whether or not to seek to double your assets under management. Vote as a group. The decision must be unanimous. And then it says, consider the following as you decide. So how many portfolio companies can one general partner reasonably support? Are there any economies of scale in this business? Will you have to hire more operating team people? If so, will the partners actually make more money for doubling their assets? Or will all the additional profits go to hire more people? All right, so who wants to go first with their opinion?
So I'm between a rock and a hard place when it comes to that. You mentioned Shark Tank earlier, Landon, and that actually came to my mind as I was reading. My family now, we love to watch that show. But now as it becomes more and more successful, I wonder how much support do these entrepreneurs really get from those sharks?
Right.
Because by now each one of them has probably dozens and dozens of deals, and how much time can they actually spend with each one of them in a quality setting? And as Austin just pointed out, their secret weapon is these operating people. And if you noticed in the exhibit, they have like between 8 and 10 times as many operating team members as competing VCs. So I think I haven't quite done the spreadsheet yet because I wasn't able to wrap my mind around how to present it in the most intelligent fashion. But I think they could quickly reach a point of diminishing results where they have so much overhead that it, just like one of the questions that you read, kind of implied that they reach a point where they just, maybe not even, but out, you diversify, obviously, on and and whatnot, going to I think they mentioned the health sector and clean energy as two of the examples, and then they mentioned New York and China as a possible geographical market. So it's always good to diversify. So that's why I'm between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I agree. And because I was going through the case with that question in mind, I thought of exactly what you said. Would they be stretching themselves too thin if they increased any more or did more companies without increasing their general partners? But then they were very, as Austin pointed out, they were very advantageous in choosing people who were experts in it, that their general partners weren't just people they grabbed off the street. And it makes me wonder, since they already have a higher number of an operating team than most venture capitalist firms, how many more would they truly have to hire in order to maintain that ability to work one-on-one with each company? And so and the other thing was they are still a very young company, and it said something about they only have 4 years of financial history, which really doesn't give you a good return history. So I feel that they should expand, but I couldn't say that they should double. I feel like expansion is definitely the right way to go, but I wouldn't say that doubling the assets, maybe increasing it 25% or something, but I felt that in order to keep the momentum they have, they should expand, but I just felt like doubling it was too advantageous at this point, and I don't feel like they would get as much of a return out of it. But that was just how I felt about it.
Yeah, same here. Austin, what do you say? You are our spreadsheet king.
So there's a few factors that I kind of took into consideration with this. In the end, I determined that I don't think that they should geographically expand. If they were to, I don't think they should double their assets, but if they were to expand, I would do it more by sector rather than just geography. Just a few reasons. So it would be very hard for them to find more people because they have those very specific requirements. So I feel like first off, just finding the people would distract them from doing their job, might damage kind of their business because they're, instead of trying to find new companies to invest in, they're trying to find new people to hire to open a new firm in China or in New York, and they might end up passing by a really good deal, a really good company to invest in, which might really hurt them in the long run. Second, I don't think that it would make them very much money. I ran some numbers. It was kind of hard to do this. I didn't feel like I really had enough numbers to work with here, but
thanks, Austin. You make me feel better.
but I mean, it wouldn't, for the founders and for the top management, for most of the company, it wouldn't really make sense for them. They would have to give up. They'd have to give up some of their money that they were making now in order to fund this new, whichever it was, New York, China, whatever they wanted. And it would also increase their, so I had the numbers basically, if they stayed the course right now, assuming they kept growing at a steady pace, they'd have management fees of about 113 million, and that would jump up. It was like a 2.5 around there. So I really don't think it would be worth it for them. And the third was just, there are too many unknowns about just the geographic expansion. The new founders, they had a couple quotes in there that kind of made them sound really hesitant and unsure about it too. It was, they said that the new ventures face challenges attracting engineers, and it's hard to determine if that caps their upside compared to similar firms in Silicon Valley. So it sounds like they would have a hard time just getting the engineers and trying to find those people. And then they also said if you can lose a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing, which they made several comments about how they didn't really know what they're doing if they were to expand. They didn't know exactly what their competition would react like, and just too many unknowns. So I definitely say just if you want to expand, do it to don't do it geographically.
I agree with that, especially since, I mean, they're already in Silicon Valley. Where else are you going to go that's going to be better than that for information technology? That's where everyone wants to go to for their startup to become successful. And I agree that I kind of went in the pre-discussion poll. I leaned towards a sector focus instead of or diversification in the sector rather than geographically, and it was for the same reasons as you, Austin. That I just felt like they would stretch themselves too thin. Where I felt like Silicon Valley already had such a high market share of information technology, and I know that there's others out there, but with where their company is, they would have to expand to such an extent to make it worth it that I feel like they would stretch themselves too thin, and as you said, they'd have to give up a lot of their profits. So I felt that if they did expand, that it would be more beneficial to expand in this sector rather than geography. So thank you, Austin.
Well, since we all seem to agree, let me make some counterpoints then. One, in regards to geographical expansion, I mean, keep in mind that you don't necessarily would have to open an office in China or New York. With teleconferences and electronic data exchange, it will be easy to just dip your toe into those markets, right? And just approach some of these Chinese startups or New York East Coast based startups and start that way without having to actually open a physical office. The other thing is, and I think you, Landon, said it, that most IT startups kind of flock to Silicon Valley. Again, I mentioned it earlier, is it's always dangerous when you find yourself in an environment where everybody agrees with you. And it's a very homogenous environment. We kind of have that at church, and so it makes it hard for us to accept outsiders, to accept people that look different, smell different, that may not fit the Molly Mormon profile that we have of what a regular, normal Mormon member should look like. And the same thing goes for, if everybody in Silicon Valley, I mean, just like the case study mentioned with the VCs, that you've seen it a million times, and 500,000 times they failed because they did this, and the other 500,000 times they were successful because they did that. But that doesn't mean that same methodology applies to every startup, right? And then the other thing is, I don't know how smart it is if they just continue to focus on really just IT and that sector. I think we are at the beginning of some great innovation in regards to clean energy, clean technology. I think as Gen Y enters more and more the marketplace, that will become increasingly important. As there's more and more citizens on this world, it will become increasingly important. So I think both health and clean energy are growing markets, and I would be afraid that A16Z may potentially be missing great opportunities for them, as well as for those startups where A16Z could really bring great value to the table. So, but I think I kind of heard it in both of your answers. I would suggest that they cautiously increase their market share and increase their assets, and cautiously, in a very down-to-earth manner, seek new market entries into whether it's geography or different sectors of investment.
Perfect. Yeah, great points. All right. Well, I will stop the broadcast unless anyone else has anything that they want to add.
No, that was great, guys.
All right.